Taking unnecessary risks with social distancing and curfews, talk to them. Remind your siblings, children, parents, and friends of the importance of social distancing. We will all get through these challenging times, but only if we can all work together. Hashtag Stay Home Cayman.
Digital banking, online, RBC. RBC Banking Online. Pay your bills anytime.
RBC Digital Banking is so easy. Even Granny and Granddad can do it. Sign up for online banking or download the RBC Caribbean app.
With RBC, it's safe and easy. Send your money hassle-free. RBC.
Visit rbc.com/Caribbean/bank at home. RBC Royal Bank. Banking reimagined.
To all school staff and especially our teachers,
we want to say thank you.
Thank you for your innovation.
For the online lessons over Zoom, Microsoft Teams, and Class Dojo.
Or on Everest and Edmodo, where I can easily access timetables and homework.
Thank you for your kindness.
For providing me with a laptop so I could still do my exam prep and revision classes.
Thank you for your commitment.
For coming up with fun ways to make schoolwork exciting.
Thank you for your thoughtfulness.
And your encouragement.
For staying in touch.
So finding time to check on me and my family just to make sure that we're all doing okay.
We want you to know that
we appreciate everything you do as educators.
Thank you for all that you do. Thank you.
A message on behalf of all government school students.
Live from Star 927 Studios in the center of Cayman's capital city, Georgetown. This is Straight Talk with Ruth Anna.
Good evening, good evening, good evening, everybody. You are tuned into Straight Talk, brought to you exclusively by Star 92.7 Premium Radio. I am your host, Ruth Anna Young. Always honored to be your host here on Straight Talk every Monday through Thursday from 5 to 6 p.m. right here and nowhere else other than Star 92.7. It is 5:01 on the Star 92.7 clock, and it is the 18th of June. We are well past the halfway mark at this stage. Happy birthday to all of you who are celebrating birthdays today, and happy anniversary to those who are celebrating anniversaries as well. I have in the virtual studio with me Miss Theresa Pitcairn. She's joining me this afternoon. We are going to be talking about race in a part of racism, and in particular colorism in the Cayman Islands. And so she'll be having that discussion with me until 6 o'clock. We know that has been incredibly enormous global discussion at this time due to the most recent events, and just something that has touched every corner of the globe, quite like the pandemic. We've seen riots and protest and stands for Black Lives Matter and across the globe, across Europe, in Australia, here in the Cayman Islands even. You've seen videos circulating, and of course if you follow the media, you certainly see what is happening in the United States. So we're going to have our own discussion about that this afternoon. 943-3700 is the line in studio. 324-1565 is the number you can WhatsApp me at. And you can also email me at straighttalkci@gmail.com. But you guys know the deal. We always start our time together here on Straight Talk with the reading of today's Daily Bread, just a moment focused on God. So today's Daily Bread is entitled Straight Ahead. And the scripture comes from 2 Kings 22, verse 2, and reads, "He did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, not turning aside to the right or to the left." It used to take the steady eye and the firm hand of a farmer to drive a tractor or combine down straight rows. But even the best eyes would overlap rows, and by end of day, even the strongest hands would be fatigued. But now there's auto steer, a GPS-based technology that allows for accuracy to within 1 inch when planting, cultivating, and spraying. It's incredibly efficient and hands-free. Just imagine sitting in a mammoth combine, and instead of gripping the wheel, you're gripping a roast beef sandwich, an amazing tool to keep you moving straight ahead. You may recall the name Josiah. He was crowned king when he was only 8 years old. Years later, in his mid-20s, Halakai, the high priest, found the book of the law in the temple. It was then read to the young king, who tore his robes in sorrow due to his ancestors' disobedience to God. Josiah set about to do what was right in the eyes of the Lord. The book became a tool to steer the people so there would be no turning to the right or to the left. God's instructions were there to set things straight. Allowing the scriptures to guide us day by day keeps our lives in line with knowing God and his will. The Bible is an amazing tool that, if allowed, keeps us moving straight ahead. Thanks be to God for that word today. As always, here on Straight Talk, we remind you, we encourage you to spend time each and every day focused on His word, meditating on His grace and how awesome He is, whether it be in the morning or the evening or right here with me, Monday through Thursday on Straight Talk. With that, I join Miss Theresa, invite Miss Theresa into the conversation. Welcome back, Miss Theresa. Certainly no stranger to the Straight Talk studio or the airwaves in general. How are you doing?
You're too much. I'm very good. Thanks very much for inviting me to have this conversation this afternoon with you and your audience. As you, and what I'd like, us to have is a real discussion about it. And the hope is that we take some of the heaviness from the conversation, so that people are more receptive to being open to talking about, I think, what I sometimes call a public secret. When they say that, well, it's kind of like that, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, we all kind of like know, but we walk around it, we dance around it, but we don't really talk too much about it. And as you and I, when we were having that very brief chat a few minutes ago, I was thinking to myself, that when I was invited to participate on Rooster's show recently, I said that when OC opened his show last Friday to raise the issue, he cautioned people and tell them to turn off the channel because it may not be something that they want to hear, because this is such a very sensitive sensitive topic. And I know that we're small, and I know that, and I'm going to use a Jamaican term. I'm not sure if it's Caymanian when you say somebody's touch us, meaning, yeah. See, that too is a part of, this, when we try to unveil our history and talk a little bit about the relationship between us and Jamaica, between us and the United Kingdom, and so on. You'll see how we embraced some of their cultural language, the food, and that sort of thing. But to go back to what I was saying at the very beginning, it is something that we tend to shy away from. And while you were having the prayer just now, I thought about women's suffrage.
Yes.
And what we had was a situation where women decided that they wanted to participate in the political process. They realized that you wouldn't have any change unless you actually address the issue head on. So kind of dealing with racism or colorism or shadism or pigmentocracyism is kind of like that. You have a situation where there are two groups or two cultures or two ways of thinking, and you're trying to get away from the negatives that makes it impossible to discuss the issue, and then just kind of like face it onward. So that's my kind of like introduction to the subject. We're gonna try and break it down today so that we include and encourage people to call in and share some of their experiences, so that we can have a useful conversation. I sent you and a friend of yours a copy of someone gave me a copy of a picture which shows all of the past Miss Cayman title holders. And I don't know if I can bring it up so that people can see it. It's kind of like difficult to show, but I am really the only person that's clearly Negro in that picture. And the question is, why then is beauty reflected as person who is half white, look kind of white, kind of brown, and not reflected in somebody who has my complexion? And I don't know if this is something that, we can kick it off with. How do we embrace beauty? What is beauty?
I want to add to something that you said in starting off. Now, I think the importance of literally like just taking the lid off of it, right? And like you said, taking out some of the heaviness that prevents us from having real discussions a lot of times, and as you say, confronting the issue head on. Because I think in many cases in my own life, a lot of it is just an ignorance, right? People don't know what they don't know. I know many people who are either white, lighter, whatever, however you want to classify them, that there is an ignorance and unawareness of the difference in life experiences, and how certain things affect them versus people who don't look like them, right? And if we can't talk about it, if it is always this angry conversation as opposed to a true conversation, a way to communicate to make it better, we will always just be going in a circle, right? There is one thing to say, to try to argue for, and I see some comments that came in from, like, for example, and I'll read them shortly, from like Francisco McKenzie on my Facebook post, speaking to the fact that we were speaking about this today, and in his situation he's referring to equal pay for equal work, speaking to him, in his experiences, feeling like he did not get equal pay for equal work compared to, people who were, from Canada or white or, things of that nature. Being Caymanian and darker skinned, he felt like he got paid less. People have different experiences around this. And yes, there is racism, there is prejudice, but sometimes there is simply ignorance. And unless we can just take the lid off and have these discussions, some of our own friends, some of the people nearest and dearest to us, won't ever have the capacity to be a part of the conversation the way they need to if we can't simply just talk about it, right? And I think that that is a critical shift that we have to make, is that we don't just, yes, there's much of it that is angering and devastating and hurtful, and there is racism that is still very prevalent, but I am also very concerned about just blatant ignorance, people who don't know, and they don't know because the conversations don't happen. And I see it transpiring on social media and in my own life.
Yeah, but I'd like you to just perhaps explain a little bit about what you mean when you say ignorance, because when we discuss it, when we tend to have this conversation, certainly from a Black optic, that is just built in and baked in with so many different experiences.
Yes.
And whilst we cannot articulate what it is that makes us angry, what it is that evokes the shame, because a lot of it is shame, and people can't really, they know it, they feel it, but they can't speak about it because it's one of those things that is, it's just there. So there is that perspective from, like I said, a Black optic, and that's not ignorance, that is something else. And which is why I wanted you to share what you really meant when you said ignorance as well, because I know you spoke of an experience that you had when you went to a certain school, because that I see as ignorance.
Right. So I, like many Caymanians, when I was going through school, I came straight up through the government public school system. I went to Westway Primary, and then what was George Hicks, and then John Gray. And I later went on to Cayman Prep to do sixth form. And it was three of us who went over from John Gray. The rest of students in the class at Cayman Prep at that time had gone to Cayman Prep before. Despite the fact that I depending on where you go, right? To some people I am Black, to some people I'm light skinned. In Jamaica I'm browning, or I'm red. In growing up, I feel like I literally had there was no discussions, no real thought about color. I didn't see it, right? I had to think really hard when this experience happened. I had to say to myself, but hold on, you didn't go to school with any white children in John Gray or what? Because I literally had to, I've never thought about it before. So I went to Cayman Prep, and overall my experience was good. However, I went to Cayman Prep at the time, my hair was relaxed, like most Black girls at that time. I didn't walk around with the curly hair that I walk around with now. And I had a student ask me, and it was a white student and someone who had been raised in Cayman, to my knowledge, most of their life, but they asked to touch my hair, and because they wanted to feel the texture of my hair. Now, it was so startling to me at the time, because I know the person was raised here. I know that there are other Black children or children of color in Cayman Prep, and certainly in the Cayman Islands. And it gave me such moment for pause. At that time, because I had to check myself, because I was like, hold on, wait, was there something I missed? And there suddenly became an awareness for me for the first time in my life of color, right? And the difference, what difference that meant. And I by no means, that person is someone I know to this day, and consider a friend. I by no means think that that person is or was ever racist. It was just purely their life experience. They were ignorant to the texture of my hair, and you would think it hard to believe that someone who'd grown up in the Cayman Islands at a time when there was, in my mind, more integration than there is now. But that still was a question for them, something that they wanted, that they wanted to know about. They wanted to know about my hair. And as I mentioned, every time I think back to it, I just laugh, because I'm like, it was not even this curly hair, and I said to someone the other day, I can understand easier when I hear an Asian in China wanting to touch dreadlocks, right? Like that, and I've heard of those experiences. To me, I reconcile that much easier than realizing that you have people, children, adults who are living right here in this melting pot, and in a situation such like that, simply hadn't even experienced to touch the hair of a person of color, despite interacting with them, right? And so that's what I refer to as an ignorance, because I don't think that person was racist or prejudiced. So some of them just don't know, and just not been exposed to it. And
but that's the
ways.
Yeah. But that's the other question now, and I'm gonna take that argument just a little different. There's a lot of material out there on what they call white fragility. I think Professor D'Angelo actually speaks to that and talks about things like that. Now, you're right in that that person may not, and I hope no one's taking this personally, because it's not intended to be personal. It's just looking at a subject matter that we're trying to flesh through. But people will say, and I mean, I have white friends. I mean, some of my best friends are white that I made while I was in university and so on, and here, and if you say to that person, the person will say, well, I'm not prejudiced, I'm not racist, I work with X, I went to school with X, and I invite them for drinks. So people will, but then of course, when you want to talk about issues that are really close, white folks who say, well, I work with that person, I'm in the same environment with that person, my children might hang out with those persons, but they don't also realize that they have what is called, quote unquote, white privilege. When you start raising those types of questions, then you might find that there's a different response. Sometimes people so if you ask somebody, just simple, can we talk about racism in Cayman? Why is it, for example, we have white schools, quote unquote, white schools? And I don't necessarily like using that term, so I use it respectfully. I'm trying to use it respectfully. But how do you have a white school, two white schools in a Caribbean community? How do you have work environments that's primarily white or primarily Indian? And I'm just speaking to cultural divide when I speak in those terms. How do you have those structures in a community? But at the end of the day, where being white is actually reflective of having being superior to any other race. Because you look at my profession. I mean, in the law firms, they're primarily Caucasian, and then when you go to the public DPP's department, it's primarily Negroes in that department. And then when you look on our bench, you will see again this kind of conflation of cultures, and you ask yourself then, the way we have these groupings, is that a reflection of the Caymanian culture? Is that a reflection of the Caymanian community where there are these clear divides? Everybody know that this exists, but no one, even when you're out socially and people feel relatively comfortable, you will hear what folks feel, for example, about the DPP's office. And usually it's not very complimentary, and we don't talk about it, and folks will say things like that in circumstances where they feel comfortable having these conversations. So again, why do people feel comfortable having these conversations where clearly pejorative statements are made about colleagues simply based on race? Now, some will say, okay, it's competence. They're really not good. They can't do their jobs. The same thing they say about Caymanians, that you got Caymanian lawyers who are inferior. They really can't do their jobs, even when the qualifications are the same, even when Caymanians are 10 times brighter, but sometimes not given the opportunity. Why are we only now having this conversation now that the guy Floyd has had that experience in the United States? Why is it we have not had that conversation before, when it's right there in plain sight for everyone to see what's going on? Not to mention us having schools based on race. And I'm not saying that it was intended,
right,
for us to have schools based on all, but this is where we are, and now we're having this conversation.
And one of the things I thought about as you were talking, I think it's important to, in the context of these conversations, I think we don't often enough acknowledge the subconscious, the human subconscious, and the things that will naturally occur even before you get into discussions about colonialism and slavery and all of the added factors. But if we simply even look at what psychology has proven to us, and I remember so distinctly, I took so many classes in university, but I remember some of my psychology classes the best. And it was in the context actually of a HR class conversation and organizational management. And we were watching some videos from a study that was done about hiring in the workplace and things of that nature. And I love that professor for how frank she always was and how honest she was about how you get hired. Right. And so she made us watch a whole documentary, and it covered things like how perceived beauty plays into how often people get hired. It also shed light on the fact of, there is a psychological a term that specifically governs this human behavior, but it basically says the more someone looks like you, the more you naturally trust them. The more you will naturally you trust them more, and you think they're smarter and more capable. Right. It is a very subconscious human dynamic. And I was so attentive through, like, that was probably one of the most interesting parts of my whole university career, those classes. And because I just think the subconscious is something that we don't pay enough attention to enough. And people get sensitive and they get offended. And I don't think it is we'll never get to a place where the subconscious never plays a role. But if we aren't aware and acknowledge even the nature of what the subconscious does, then people will always get offended. Right? The reality of human nature is the more you look like me, unless I am being conscious about what I am doing, and unless I am doing my best to cognizantly be fair and give fair treatment, I am going to naturally, me as a human being, I'm going to naturally have certain behaviors, right? And certain reactions. And yes, our life experiences are going to also help shape that. But even when you remove all the extra, we will always have to operate from a very conscious place, and do not, in order to ensure that there is fair treatment, and that we are not, that we are doing what we can to essentially override our subconscious sometimes, right?
Yes, so they call that unconscious bias.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
Yeah,
mm-hmm.
what you were speaking of that kind of like the term, and as you rightly say, you have to really check yourself when you see that that's really coming into play, because that's really how you're raising a daughter now, and
Mm-hmm.
you're seeing how often that will pop up from time to time, and then you have to check yourself to make sure that the response that you provide her is one that it's not necessary. And we're human beings, as you rightly say, because you're not going to get it right all the time, but you want to make sure that the way you manage those circumstances when they arise, it won't negatively impact one on her and your relationship, but then the relationship between the two of you.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And trust me, becoming a parent changes everything. And it does bring about a whole different awareness of how do you tackle those conversations with your child? Because one of the things, my father was the one who accompanied me when I was going off to university, right? And I went to the University of Miami. He was the one that we got on the flight together. My sister, mom, everybody was here. We left, they were crying in the airport. And I was like, oh, I'm going away to college. Y'all better stop that crying. And I was excited. And I remember one of the last things that my father said to me before he left me in Miami. And for anyone who knows my father is very dark skinned. My mother is what we call white Caymanian. And my father distinctly, and it was the first and probably the only time my father has ever broached that subject with me. And he said, don't you go to America and get caught up in that black and white thing. He said, you just go there and you work hard, because when you work hard, then none of that matters. Right. And because my father through his career has garnered he's a brilliant man as far as I'm concerned, educated, has worked very hard, and he's garnered the respect on all sides, right? And he of his colleagues and all that kind of stuff. And that was literally, and I was so I was stunned when he said it, because he literally never before that and never since that has ever had that conversation with me. But that was some of the last words he left me with when sending me off to university, when he was leaving me in Miami. And so it was, and I remembered it, right? Because I saw it in his life. Okay, you work hard, you study hard, you do a good job, and it doesn't matter, right? Like that's how not only does it matter, but it makes a difference. But I also could see as I got older that sometimes there are people who work hard, are educated, are intelligent, and they do not get their fair shake because of exactly what we're talking about, of racism and colorism and all of it, right? We do have a caller on the line. Let me go straight to the phone line. Welcome to Straight Talk. What's on your mind today?
Good evening, ladies.
Good evening. And then we just
Good evening.
Okay, Miss Theresa can hear the caller. Okay, what's on your mind today?
I am sorry I couldn't join you guys for this call. I'm on my regular gig, delivery gig. This conversation is an interesting. Have a good day. This is an interesting conversation that you guys are having, and I think the George Floyd murder kind of kick-started a conversation that really needed to happen here in this country for some time. And then we had our own kind of little George Floyd situation, if you will, in terms of the color aspect, not murder. With I don't know if Miss Theresa follows anything on social media. I think I mentioned it to Ruthana. We're like a mommy's group, and the name, was most reflective, definitely, of the Cayman Islands, and in its name. However, the display picture was not what I would have considered indicative or depicted what we typically know Caymanians to be. And now we know they come in all shapes and colors and so forth. But I mean, none of them look like me. None of them look like Ruthana, and they certainly didn't look like you, Miss Theresa. So that really started a very large conversation. But I believe around this argument about colorism, racism, we have it here, and it's very deep rooted. I am a parent of two children, a brown, Chinese-ish, Caymanian-ish looking daughter who was told by a Caucasian child that she didn't like her. She didn't want to be her friend because her skin looked like poop. I mean, these are the things that are happening here. And I mean,
yeah, I hear about it.
The more difficult thing for me is that we have these kinds of things happening with Caymanians to Caymanians. That for me is a more difficult situation.
And it has for a long time,
right? Yeah, it absolutely has. I mean, I gave the example. I was talking to a friend and I said, I mean, I'm not putting anybody out, but I remember visiting that quote unquote white relative who, the gardener who has been her gardener for 100 years, asked for a glass of water and she got him a plastic cup versus a white man, a tourist who she never saw a day in her life, drives up and says, oh, can I have a glass of water? He's blonde hair, blue-eyed, and white. We don't know him from Adam, but we're going to take out our best to give him. And we don't have a clue if he came from the sun or the sky. So for me, this Caymanian on Caymanian racism is more of an issue for me than even the expat versus Caymanian conversation or argument, because some people dare to deny that it even exists. But for me, the one that is most difficult, not just to accept, but the one that needs most addressing is the Caymanian on Caymanian crime. It is rampant. It is absolutely rampant. I see it in the LA. I see it amongst just ordinary Joe Blow citizens. I mean, I'll give you an example, and I was quite cut up about this one. I mean, I don't think he'll take any offense to me calling his name. Mr. Michael Miles and Alric Lindsay had raised some funds, were donating some laptops, and a member of the house decided that they would comment on the post to say, oh, well, we're giving out laptops, but we're not flaunting it. And I'm saying, but where is this coming from? Like, where is this coming from? When her colleague or a member of her government was giving out the laptops, I didn't see any of those remarks being made. And I said to myself, I wonder if this is really a black thing, or this is I didn't do it thing. But then when I had to look at the other colleague who is lighter colored, I said, could it be that? Maybe I'm reading into it way too much, but these are conversations that we never have. These are conversations that I don't think that we ever expected to have, but more and more Caymanians are not looking like what we've customarily grown to see them look like. You and I, Rosanna, Miss Theresa, they're coming Asian, they're coming full Caucasian, they're coming full black, they're coming mixed, they're coming but these
dynamic
like
continues to shift, and something that came to mind as you were talking, as I said, these are conversations that these are things that have long existed in Cayman. And as I before we came on air, I was telling Miss Theresa, I think it's so funny that we even have colorism within the Caymanian population, because I'll share this, and then I do have to go to my first break. But when I was at university, now by Cayman standards, in Cayman standards, my mother is white, or Cayman white, as we say, right? But I remember being at university in Miami, having a picture of her in my apartment. In one of my good friends from university is pure Caucasian. When she came to my apartment for the first time, because I'd always said to her, oh, my dad's black, my mom's white, right? And she came to my apartment for the first time and she goes, I didn't know your mom was black. I said, huh? And she said, and she's like, yeah, her mom's black. And I said, oh, well, in Cayman, we call her Cayman white, right? And so I think it's, and I remember that being one of those moments in my life where it was like, oh, well, color and what is light and dark, white and black, when it pertains to skin tone, is absolutely the variances as to what is considered white and black in different countries and different cultures is so far apart, because there is no Caymanian that would normally look at my mom and say that my mom is black, right? But for my friend in university who is from the US, for her, my mother was clearly a black woman. Right.
Absolutely.
And so, but I do have to go to my first break. And if you want to rejoin the conversation, you can feel free to call in when we come back.
Yeah, sure.
All right. So thank you so much for those contributions so far. Ms. Theresa, we're going out to our first break of our time together. Guys, it is 5:35 on the Star 92.7 clock. Always a hot conversation. I have comments coming in on Facebook that I need to read as well, that I will share as soon as we come back from the break. But keep it locked for some more Straight Talk on Star 92.7.
Join the conversation. The phone lines are now open. 943-3700. You can also find us on Facebook or email us at straighttalkci@gmail.com.
To all school staff and especially our teachers,
we want to say thank you.
Thank you for your innovation.
For the online lessons over Zoom, Microsoft Teams, and Class Dojo.
Or on Everest and Edmodo, where I can easily access timetables and homework.
Thank you for your kindness.
For providing me with a laptop so I could still do my exam prep and revision classes.
Thank you for your commitment.
For coming up with fun ways to make schoolwork exciting.
Thank you for your thoughtfulness.
And your encouragement.
For staying in touch.
So finding time to check on me and my family just to make sure that we're all doing okay.
We want you to know that
we appreciate everything you do as educators.
Thank you for all that you do. Thank you.
A message on behalf of all government school students.
Burger King has been a part of the Cayman family for decades, and we know our family needs a little extra help right now. So we're introducing the best Whopper deal on the planet. 4 Whoppers for just $10.
We are family. I got 4 big Whoppers with me. We are family. Get up, everybody, let's eat.
The Burger King Family Bundle. 4 Whoppers for just $10. Available at all Burger King drive-thrus for a limited time.
Do you like winning? How about winning free gas? Free gas from Rubus is as simple as follow, like, tag, and share. Say what? You heard it right. Follow, like, tag, and share. Winners selected daily on our social media platforms. Go to Rubus on Facebook and Instagram. Follow, like, tag 5 friends, and share the post. It's that simple. Daily winners drawn for $25 fuel vouchers. So that's like earning, hold on, like 1 minute of work, it's 60 minutes for an hour. $25 divided by carry the 1. No, forget it. It's definitely worth your time to follow, like, tag, and share with Rubus and win.
All I do is win, no matter what.
Rubus, fuel the difference.
You know, when we look back at our teens, quite often we come to appreciate our parents' efforts to keep us safe. What was restrictive then becomes sound reasoning as an adult. The current curfews are much the same. Temporary restrictions for our community with your long-term health and welfare in mind. We will mature through these challenging times and emerge stronger. Stay responsible now so that our future can be bright. Hashtag stay home, Cayman.
Welcome back to Straight Talk with Ruth Anna on Star 927.
We are back, folks, and you are tuned into Straight Talk, brought to you exclusively by Star 92.7 Premium Radio. I am your host, Ruth Anna Young, joined this afternoon by Ms. Theresa Pitcairn. We'll be with you until 6 o'clock this evening. We are talking race and colorism in the Cayman Islands. Of course, this is an ongoing global conversation largely in the wake of the incident with George Floyd in the United States, but it has had resounding effect across the globe. 943-3700 is the line in studio. You can also WhatsApp me at 324-1565, or you can email me at straighttalkci@gmail.com. I will go straight to some of the comments, Ms. Theresa, that have come in on Facebook, so I don't run too behind on those. And so Magdalene Ebanks Clark says, and this was from earlier in our conversation, and they said, because no one wants to say so, it is in the churches, and no one wants to say so either. I think that was in reference to our earlier discussions about, racism and colorism existing in Cayman. And I think her point speaks exactly to what we're talking about. We don't like to talk about it, but unless we talk about it, it will continue to exist. Shout out to my aunt tuned in from Florida, Miss Natasha Gilling Bunting. She has a quite lengthy comment, but I will read it in its entirety. She says, Cayman, in my belief, seems to engage more in casual racism and colorism. It refers to conduct involving negative stereotypes or prejudices about people on the basis of race, color, and ethnicity. Examples include jokes, offhanded comments, and exclusion of people from social situations on the basis of race. Some associate racism with a belief in race superiority or deliberate acts of discrimination. Casual racism concerns not so much a belief in the superiority of races, but negative prejudice or stereotypes concerning race. Unlike covert and intentional acts of racism, casual racism isn't often intended to cause offense or harm. One of the obstacles to having an open conversation about race is the tendency to downplay things as not truly or really racist. This can embolden or encourage prejudice. You don't need to subscribe to doctrines of racial superiority or include racial violence to say or do something with racist implications. Like other forms of racism, casual racism can marginalize, degenerate, or humiliate those who experience it. Harm can occur even if conduct isn't motivated by hate or malice. Racism can also exclude the target from wider society. It sends a message that they aren't welcome. It reinforces social barriers and attacks the dignity of the victim as an equal member of society. It can undermine civility and social cohesion. Being aware of casual racism involves recognizing that we are all accountable for the things we say or do. Making casual racist jokes or comments can have a negative impact upon a target individual or group. Casual racism can fuel prejudice and discrimination. Joking about matters of race, particularly of people of a different background, can also lead others to form unfavorable impressions of you. A change in social attitudes is necessary for combating casual racism. Everyone can contribute to the change, though speaking up against racism when they encounter it. That is one of the comments. Any thoughts from you, Ms. Theresa, on Natasha's comments?
Yeah, so she included that's a huge baked mac and cheese because yeah, there's a lot of stuff that's in there, and clearly we have that here in Cayman.
Absolutely.
I wanted to mention Siobhan mentioned things that's been circulated on Facebook, for example. And as I listened to the comment that your aunt just made, I thought of one in particular that talked a little bit about whether or not they have persons in the workplace that assist Caymanians in doing well. The comment, and I'll paraphrase it just a little bit, and paraphrase it based on my memory of the issues that I found. One of the issues that I found interesting, the individual said something like, when they work in the private sector, you may have people in management to the person at the very lowest rung of that particular working environment. If they have a friend from the UK, and it's primarily in the private sector right across the board, they have friends within the organization that they work with who are willing to bring their friends in on board because of that same familiarity that you were speaking of before, where people feel comfortable with certain groups of people. And the Caymanian individual was saying, this is my country. I go to work in these environments, and I don't have that option to find a Caymanian in management that I can say, here is a friend of mine. This person is unemployed. The person is competent. Can we give her an opportunity to come and work in this environment? So the way in which the comment evolved, the person was saying, well, why is it we don't have those same opportunities in the workplace, where on the one hand they can identify Caymanians who can do the job and invite leadership to employ them, and on the other hand, who is looking out for him or her, the Caymanian person that's employed, their upward mobility within the firm, because they see people who come in less competent, less skilled. They have they have access to leadership, and some of the times it's just based on race, not necessarily based on competences. And someone else expanded the conversation about who firms employ in HR, usually Caymanians, and Caymanians, as you alluded to earlier, who folks will feel comfortable with, maybe because they're brown Caymanian, maybe because they feel that they Caymanian. I mean, people refer to such persons pejoratively as token persons who are employed to keep that company in check, so that when persons in immigration, for example, ask about who is responsible for bringing people on board, they'll always point to the Caymanian person who is supposed to be people.
Miss Theresa, sorry, I had lost you a little. I lost you a little bit there. The last thing I heard you say was tokenism.
Yeah. So, in a nutshell, rounding that comment out, the Caymanian was saying, look, I am a professional. I work in the private sector, but I don't have the same accesses that people that don't look like me have within the workplace. And even if I wanted to have a conversation with leadership to invite other Caymanians to come and work in the firm, that they don't have that opportunity. And I'll speak to two things on that. Because of the way in which Caymanian status has been issued, the people who are now in charge of HR are usually first generation Caymanians. And you can't really, and those first generation Caymanians do not look like you or I, Ruth Anna. And they will then employ persons who then look like them, who are also first generation, or they find someone from United Kingdom or a similar jurisdiction who they feel comfortable with, and so on. My question has always been, and this is no secret, this again is like a public secret, as I spoke to at the very beginning. We all know this. Why is it that Caymanians tolerate this in their community? And in saying that, I'm not, again, attacking anyone, not trying. What is it about us that makes it okay for us to say that this behavior should be tolerated? Because in many other communities, that sort of thing would not be tolerated. I don't know what does that speak to. What does that say about us and racism or shadism or pigmentocracy, or how we view ourselves, how we value ourselves in terms of our own personal growth in our community?
I think what you used, I think in my opinion, what is the critical point we have to look at? You said, how do we view ourselves, right? And I've said this over the last couple of years in particular. I believe that Caymanians, especially many generational Caymanians, struggle with what I consider to be self-hate, right? I have yet to really come to a place. I have yet to, I guess, have adequate time and time for research to really decide how I think this has come about. But I think that we doubt ourselves a lot of times. We doubt other Caymanians. And so a lot of this can sometimes be from inside out versus outside in. Now, it contributes to what happens from the outside in. But I really believe that over the years, Cayman has definitely has suffered colorism. And I think although I did not develop a large awareness of it until my adulthood, and I was not largely exposed to it in my childhood at all. Why? I don't know. I don't know if Westby just different, right? But it really isn't. That's the reality. But I was fortunate, if I maybe because when I look back on our history and our family, both sides were very blended, and the family is so big that the only thing I was largely exposed to as a child and in my childhood was my own family, to be very honest. So that could be why, I didn't experience a lot of it. So it's, I question those things as well. But I have seen over the last few years what I consider self-hate within Caymanians. And I think that's why it's accepted, so to speak. I think we are trying very hard to turn a corner now as generations become a little bit more aware and cognizant about what is happening and how it's negatively affecting us, and what used to be as Natasha mentions, casual jokes and those sorts of things that existed in our
But were they jokes? And I mean, you know me well enough to know how I peel these things off to get to the root. But touch on the point that you raised about self-loathing. That is so true. We do the bleaching. Caymanians try to run from the black, but not only Caymanians. I mean, Madame Walker in the United States she became one of the first black millionaires selling the hot comb, and you know how that used to tear into. I don't know if you had those experiences when you were younger.
No, Mr. Ruther. The hot comb were kind of gone when we were on to relaxers, right?
But the line, the relaxer, how that burnt your head out.
Yeah, and when I think about it now, right? When I think about it now, and I think about what a relaxer is, and Lord, Miss Theresa, we could go have a whole conversation about what black women we saw, and it was normal. That and to be honest, and I have a call coming in, so I'll take the call in a quick second. But I thought about that after I stopped relaxing my hair. And to be honest, I did not and have not stopped relaxing my hair because I have been on some grand, like, I have to be all natural. Like, I am a makeup artist. I love my blonde hair, all those kinds of things. Anything that makes me feel great, whether that's blonde, whether that's relaxer, whether that is a good face, beat full of makeup, whatever it is, like, I can dig it, right? Because I am comfortable in my own skin, but I certainly, I am personality wise, I'm an extrovert. I'm quite a peacock. So all of these things, the jewelry, all that stuff that comes is enjoyable for me. Right. But when after I stopped relaxing my hair and I thought about how normal it was for us to, like, you gotta make sure you don't scratch your hair, you don't put the comb in it, you don't do all those things with hopes that
and when you're sleeping at night, you gotta sleep a certain way.
so your scalp don't get burnt, to relax out your curls. Like, do we understand how crazy that stuff is? And yes, beauty products have come a very long way. But I remember even hearing about products like Jaffray's that got banned because it was so harsh, but that was a normal thing. But let me go to the phone lines. Welcome to Straight Talk. What's on your mind today?
Hi, good afternoon, Ruthanna, and good afternoon, Miss Theresa. How are you ladies this evening?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm driving home from work and I'm hearing some beautiful Caymanian women having dialogue, and I just wanted to chime in on the conversation a little bit before you guys wrap up. Sure. But one of the things in the conversations I've been having with people regarding sort of race and the dynamic, and Ms. Theresa touched on it briefly, the dynamic between the first generation Caymanians and those that are more established and have that multi-generational connection. And she's absolutely right. A lot of it has to do with the way that status grants have been held in the past, I would say over the past 20-year period. And just sort of false inflating our population in a way that is not a natural population growth. And, that poses a lot of socio and cultural issues when you grow your population in that way. Mm-hmm. But as I was sharing with someone, the fact of the matter is that those persons are here and they're here to stay. And so we have to figure out a way to kind of bridge that gap, because it is going to be to our benefit, to our preservation, right? And so we have to step away from this, well, they've come here and, they're from England, or they're from here, or they're from there, and, whatever they say is right because they're rich or because they're in power. And I think we have to start challenging some of these first generation Caymanians more on their acculturation and their assimilation, but do it in a way that engages dialogue, so it's not an attack. Because I think we suppress our feelings about the way our government has handled this issue. And really and truly, we should be holding our elected representatives accountable for the way that they've been dealing with immigration and the way that they've been dealing with our population growth, right? Because I don't know why they think this 100,000 person marker is the gold standard, because it's not. You know,
least not
but
in the way we've been trying to achieve
at
it.
least not in the way that we're thinking, right? And so, you know, I think, you know, a lot of times we think, well, we're the ones who've been here. They need to come to us. But the fact of the matter is that they've been here and they've gotten status, and they've done it without having to integrate and assimilate into our society. So we now have to find a way to bridge that gap and to open that dialogue. And that might involve us as multi-generational Caymanians going to them and saying, listen, why don't we go have a coffee? Why don't we have a tea? I would love to talk to you a little bit about my experience as a multi-generational Cayman, give you a different perspective, you know, and I'd love to hear your perspective. Because I you know, and at the bottom, at the end of it, I think that you are going to understand more where we're coming from a cultural standpoint, that we're not taking away your immigration status from you, but what we want from you is for you to acculturate and assimilate and integrate more, right?
So can I just interject, because there's some really
I know,
good
right? She
points.
started
like some fever grass tea,
right,
you know?
Girl, no, I'm inviting them for stew conch. I ain't inviting them. I'm not inviting them for no tea.
So you're saying we have to take the
start with a
initiative.
casual thing, and then you invite them to your home for a meal for this. When
They
we
can come
look
straight
at,
to my house. They can come straight to my
but when
house.
we look at, when I look at, you know, people who are now, I would say more like second generation Caymanians, where their families may have come here in the 60s and the 70s, and they were born here or came here very young and grew up here. They talk like us, they sound like us, they dye conchs with us, they cook better turtle than us, they eat cassava cake with us. They are us. They are one of us, right? And so the difference was in the way in which we facilitated that acculturation and assimilation into our community, right? And I think and that's a really hard pill to swallow, to think that I might have to be the one to hold the olive branch out to you. But it's something that I've been encouraging a lot of my friends and family to think about, because I think if we offer that branch and it's denied, then we really know that, hey, this is someone who really doesn't really care about Cayman or Caymanians or anything else, right? But if they come, but if they accept it, then I think that we will find that we might be able to use dialogue to create allies and less division.
And Natasha says, preach, caller, preach.
Thank you. And it's a hard pill to swallow,
it
right?
is.
It's hard for us to come to that, because we feel like we've been invaded. But the fact of the matter is we can petition our government to change immigration policies so that in the future, we have more regulations in terms of who we are inviting to be a part of our country. But for those first generation Caymanians, they're already here. We can't take it away from them now.
And
so the only other thing we can do is include them. So I'll hang up and listen to your comments, but I just wanted to bring that element and drop that little maybe seed and food for thought for the dialogue.
That's a whole ham hock, okay? That is not a seed or a nugget, okay? But thank you so much. Thank you so much for the call. Miss Theresa, if you want to offer some brief comments, that I have a caller that I want to get to quickly before we close out the show.
Wrap it up. So the young lady raised a lot of very interesting points. And of course, one of the first things that came to my mind is, what is the national character for Cayman? What do Caymanians envision as its national character? That's one question. And it's interesting that the way, and I say we generally, you're suggesting that we, the people that have been here for tons of generations, we're the ones that have to go to these folks to actually start the conversation, and not in the reverse. Second, the other thing, and that I'm going to stretch a bit, it's even worse, because the way globalization has evolved, and the way so I give you an example. If you are someone that is in charge of a big organization, and they're usually white, and they're going to bring us on someone that looks like me or Ruthana, or someone that's local, and this person is going to be required to integrate with foreign people. And foreign people or foreign clients are usually comfortable with white folks, not like me, not like Ruth Anna, and so on. So you then have to work 10 times as hard if you're given that opportunity to develop the business so that you generate more fees and so on. So that even now, with the racism and shadism that we have the added step of trying to fit into the way in which businesses operate on a global level to prove that we are worthy of actually being employed. So that is another strand that we can discuss at some other time.
Oh, absolutely. Because and unfortunately, it's 6 o'clock on the button. I was trying to make it to the last caller, but we will have to spill this conversation over into a next day. So I promise you, because I know there's comments on Facebook, callers that I have not gotten to. Ms. Theresa, if we can plan for another day next week or shortly thereafter, I would be grateful. And so with the audience, because clearly there's still much to be said around this issue. But I will close by saying this. Number one, Ms. Theresa, as always, thank you very much for joining and helping, just helping navigate some very difficult but necessary conversations. And to what the caller did say, I am happy. Like, I am not inviting anybody for coffee or tea. Anybody who would like to come to my dining room table and eat some stew conch, or I can cook you fish, I can make anything Caymanian so that we can have a conversation about my experience as a generational Caymanian. 324-1565. I love to entertain people and I love to talk about my country and my culture. And so I don't care who you are, we can make it happen. But Ms. Theresa, thank you as always. And hopefully we can do this again very, very, very soon. Guys, it is 6:01 on the Star 92.7 clock. I do apologize because I know I did not get to read all the comments or get to all of the callers, but we will continue this conversation. But please keep it locked all weekend long to Star 92.7. I can't believe it. It's Thursday, which means I'll be back again on Monday for some more Straight Talk. We will have Medical Monday brought to you by our partners at Health City Cayman Islands, and then on into the rest of our week. But I love you guys, and keep it locked on Star 92.7.